Torej, spoštovane gospe in spoštovani gospodje, lepo vas pozdravljam na današnjem predavanju profesorja doktorja Ramseya Erika Ramseyja v okviru humanističnih korespondenc, ki jih Inštitut Nove revije, Zavod za humanistiko in Forum za humanistiko, ki deluje pod njegovim okriljem, organizirata v sodelovanju, kakor je že gospod Zalaznik povedal, z Novo univerzo. Tudi jaz se v svojem imenu vsem vam zahvaljujem, da ste prišli. Mogoče začnemo s tem, da najprej razdelimo. Profesor Ramsey bo se v svojem predavanju nanašal na nekatere tekste in prijazno je pripravil izročke, tako da morda jih tukaj najprej. Ta čas, ko med uvodom morda tako vsak Torej, veliko veselje mi je, da lahko tukaj predstavim profesorja doktorja Ramseya Erika Ramseyja, ki kot predavatelj deluje na Barrett Nearness College, ki v okviru Arizona State University v Phoenixu, v Arizoni, se pravi v ZDA. Tam ne deluje samo kot profesor, ampak je pravzaprav tudi dekan tega oddelka koledža, ki deluje v okviru zahodnega kampusa Arizona State University. Profesor Ramsey Eric Ramsey je doktoriral iz filozofije in komunikologije na Purdue University. Ukvarja pa se prvenstveno z vprašanji hermenevtike, kritične teorije, filozofije, komunikacije, z tega, kar z vidika, ki ga Američani imenujejo kontinentalna filozofija, z vidika kontinentalne filozofske perspektive. Poglavitno področje njegovega zanimanja je vprašanje etične prakse komunikacije. Poleg številnih člankov, ki jih je objavil v različnih revijah, je objavil tudi dve knjige. Ena nosi naslov Leaving us to Wander, torej dopuščati, jaz sem to nekako prevedel kot dopuščati za čudenje ali čudenje, in se ukvarja z vprašanji, ki jih napisal v sodelovanju z biologinjo Lindi Wiener, o vprašanjih, ki jih znanost ne more zastaviti. Drugo njegovo delo, ki je šlo v knjižni obliki, pa je The Long Path to Nearness, Dolga pot k bližini, ki poskuša prikazati nekakšen filozofski prispevek teoriji komunikacije in etike. Deluje tudi kot urednik. V svojem predvsem pa, in to sem imel pač kot gost lansko leto priložnost od blizu izkusiti, predvsem pa deluje resnično kot zavzet pedagog, in tudi v tem smislu je tudi prejel nekaj nagrad za svoje pedagoško delo. Je član International Institute of Hermeneutics, se pravi Mednarodnega inštituta za hermenevtiko, in v bistvu na enem izmed teh dogodkov na Poljskem v Varšavi leta 2011 so se tudi midva spoznala. Je pa tudi, in na podlagi tega poznanstva smo ga povabili tudi, da sodeluje v našem forumu za humanistiko. V bistvu zdaj bi pa jaz kar prepustil profesorju Ramseyju besedo. Naslov njegovega predavanja Enduring the Humanities Again and Again. Nekako v približnem prevodu bi lahko to rekli, brez prestanka pretrpevati humanistiko. Profesor Ramsey bo govoril v angleščini, mislim, da to ne bo tak problem. Če pa bo kakšno vprašanje, pa lahko tudi jaz pomagam z prevodi in tako. potem v diskusiji. So please, Professor Dr. Ramsey, I surrender the floor to you.
I couldn't be more grateful for your invitation and this wonderful chance to say something about the humanities and how I believe protecting them will require a care for words. I'm also thankful for all of your hard-won abilities in this city of bridges that allows us to span the linguistic divide by permitting me to deliver my words tonight in English. To thank you, I shall try to bring a few things that are allowed in English by playing with a few words to open my paper, and then share a hermeneutic reading of a poem written in English as a way to demonstrate some reasons why we need to defend the humanities and how we might do so with the poets. I'm so grateful to be a part of this series called Humanistic Correspondences. I've had a long love affair with the letter and the epistle, so I love the title quite a lot. I want to thank Professor and Dr. Dejan Komel for the invitation, and Tomasz Zaleznik. Thank you so much to the forum, and to my host here in Ljubljana, Drs. Bosic and Koželi. Thank you. Hala. The overall epigraph to my paper called Enduring the Humanities Again and Again is from Brecht. And don't shut your eyes and don't desert, but learn to learn and try to learn for what? Section 1, the way things are, preparing to engage tradition. The epigraph is from Vattimo. The classics, the things that have held out, weren't perhaps necessarily classics right from the outset. Those things destined to hold out. But the fact that they did become classics involves me. What I am is largely the fruit of their endurance. To wish things not to be as they are, it helps to see hints and allusions of something other in nearly, if not everything, we already love in the text and traditions of the humanities. We might say the humanities give us hope as an archive of living possibilities. If, as I believe, the humanities is at its heart a hermeneutic enterprise because human being is fundamentally a human task, then by way of a radical hermeneutic education, we are able to cultivate what Gadamer calls the prejudices fitting to our time. Were we to embrace the claim that every reading is a rereading, then learning to read in sophisticated ways seems essential to imagining more fully the first comings of something other, to achieve what Ricoeur calls, quote, a redefining of what is already defined, end quote. Learning to reread is, this hermeneutic sense, allows us to embrace the pre-arrival of something better in the pieces we come across in the classic texts. Consequently, in light of our shared work in Forum, I understand this return to the humanities as a radical defense of tradition, or perhaps better, so as not to confuse, a defense of the tradition by radicals. In a Gadamerian fashion, I remain close to the power of questions and close to the point on which Gadamer insists, namely, that all our responses are answers to questions, even if they themselves are formed as interrogatives. In English, there is a playfulness in the word question as it includes the word quest. The word question holds thus a sketch of how we ought to proceed. Hermeneutic questions send us not looking for definitive answers that can be proven. Rather, they send us on a quest where close reading, interpretation, and persuasion are required. This quest is one resembling more of a sojourn of looking deep and reading carefully than a slavish map following, because we do not know exactly where we are going to end up when we embrace a hermeneutic comportment towards texts. The impossibility of final answers ought to enliven the search for multiple responses and never discourage nor force us to abort the never-ending search. It remains vital to stay on the quest of which an enduring defense of the humanities is a central part. By either settling once and for all on one answer or lamenting there cannot be a single timeless one would abandon the task altogether. There are no doubt many dangers waiting on the horizons of such quests, and yet, without our undertaking it with a sense of determination, we shall cede the entire terrain of the tradition to a banal repetition or something worse. Consequently, today I share with you a few thoughts on how we might, or at least how I have, oriented myself on this quest of an enduring defense of the humanities. To end this opening section, let me use an example that is fitting to these Ljubljana surroundings. I agree with the American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson that we live in truth, but it needs poetic saying to matter to our lives. We are able to see poetry's profundity in the square not far from where we are this evening. I had heard of this lovely example before seeing it here for myself. My host, Dr. Bosic, made a beautiful discourse about it while he was with Barrett, the Honors College students in the US recently. It has to do with Presheren's poem that resides sketched into the street. Are Presheren's words, which are trod upon each day, to be seen as being trampled into silence by such traffic? Or are we to see them there below our feet as the most apt metaphor for how the humanities might hear poetry's call? Standing for the promise of the humanities, they remind us daily, even there on the well-worn and crowded street. Okay. They say to us that our being is grounded in poetry. That is, they ground our understanding. Words well placed are the buoying uplift that keeps us from falling too deeply into Gestalt. From beneath our feet, they seem to ask, might it be poetry that points the way out even in these trying times? My desire tonight is to stay near the hope suggested by the latter of these two interpretations, while lamenting the ways we no doubt undertake the trampling of words all too often. Section 2, Coordinates for a Radical Hermeneutic Resistance, a passage from Gadamer. Hermeneutical experience is concerned with tradition. This is what is to be experienced. But tradition is not simply a process that experience teaches us to know and govern. It is language. If, as Gadamer maintains above, that language and tradition are synonyms, and if we cannot help but be thrown into an always already ongoing meaningfulness, then as we develop ways to understand this relationship, we shall benefit from an orientation that provides some keen sense of the abounding dangers. The possibility of debilitating prejudices embedding themselves in our understanding is one of the ever-present dangers of hermeneutics. This is a problem indeed for this approach, a problem for us as teachers, as writers, and translators. A brief example from somewhere near philosophy's beginning. It is for very good reasons Plato has the prisoner in his cave allegory chained there since birth. Few images are as powerful in showing us that with which we are contending has been with us and our students for quite some time. This situation keeps us from delivering a wholly inviting message to those whose dispositions have been shaped forever by the calculative thinking of the type of world disclosure that Heidegger calls Gestalt. It is difficult, is it not, to rally enthusiasm around the desire for more ambiguity, more uncertainty, more vulnerability in those whose calculative expectations of the world are for definitive answers, which come with speed and announce themselves with fanfare. Who rallies to the banner of the difficult and painstaking task of interpretation, except those who have, somehow, already grown fond of and enamored with its pleasure? Yet we must find a way to attract, to get ourselves and others to embrace and endure a life of hermeneutic struggle against incapacitating literalisms, and to embrace the Gadamerian insight that that ambiguity is not a weakness of words. A group of thinkers who are gathered under the name the Retort Collective, I believe, give us coordinates by which to proceed to face these dangers without our succumbing to our own literalist folly. In their still masterful, decade-old book, Afflicted Powers, these coordinates, they claim, must be attended to by any theory embracing a call to transformation, a call I believe central to the most sophisticated understanding of the humanities. I share with them the commitment that this opposition leading to transformation needs to be, quote, a non-orthodox, non-nostalgic, non-rejectionist, non-apocalyptic critique of the modern. Otherwise, the ground of opposition to the present will be permanently ceded to one or another fundamentalism, end quote. This focus on achieving a position that meets the demands of these four coordinates is in line with the task and projects of radical hermeneutics, because hermeneutics, too, is at its best when it seeks to contest all forms of religious, free market, or scientific fundamentalism and literalism without itself succumbing to orthodoxy. Oriented by the other coordinates, hermeneutics preserves a utopian hope for the future in being non-apocalyptic. Furthermore, it must resist the wholesale rejection of modernity and tradition. Lastly, hermeneutics of education will resist the temptation, as well as being on guard against, the inadvertent embrace of nostalgia that engaging the traditions bears within it as a constant threat. Despite our detour through the traditional text, we shall not pretend there is a pre-modern solution to our postmodern problem. As all of us who follow the hermeneutic legacies initiated by Heidegger and Gadamer, we suffer the weight and trajectory of the tradition of received interpretations. Understanding that this fate cannot be overcome by any full break from it, what we might call Überwindung, I wish to understand and make use of Gianni Vattimo's understanding of a concept, also borrowed from Heidegger, of Verwindung, as a metaphor for the type of reading heeding the warnings of the four coordinates I've just outlined. Translating it sometimes as twisting away and others as distortion, Vattimo offers Verwindung as a strategy for engaging tradition so as not to be determined to the end by it, while simultaneously acknowledge we shall never be finished with it, nor ought we wish to be free of it. To be situated within tradition, Gadamer tells us, does not limit the freedom of knowledge, but makes it possible. As we are unable once and for all to overcome traditions, because without traditions we are not, we shall have to come to terms with it. Put another way, to be our best at critiquing the banal conservatism, we shall have to be vigilant conservators of the humanities in ways that are non-apocalyptic, non-orthodox, non-rejectionist, and non-nostalgic. So these are the compass, like the compass at the entry of the hostel, that give us our orientation. Vattimo liking these twists and detours of Verwindung to a chess game in which all the pieces are knights. Skakash? Okay, the jumper. Okay. Says such interpretations make nothing but horse moves and consequently prohibit unrestricted and purely linear progress. Although he does not elaborate this metaphor further, I find it wonderfully suggestive. The way back to traditional text is not a straight line. We are able, however, in this twisting and distorting movement of interpretation, even restrained as we are by tradition, to move forward or back, bit by bit, moving both to the heart of our reading while also moving by directions forced upon us. Given the restrictions on moving the piece called the knight, there are only certain places we are able to go. This movement is always partial, as we are always having to succumb to the force of things, and this force and inertia requires we level off our moves at the end of every interpretive turn. Finitude, embodied and embedded in the very real situations in which we find ourselves acting, says to us, you may move here, but you cannot move there, or at least not yet. It takes a number of turns to get to a new place in the tradition, whether we mean in one's current reading of a text, or one's lifetime, or for an entire generation of thinking. This necessity sets into relief both the concept of enduring and never ending in my title. We undertake a number of moves through our works in the humanities, and we leave the results of our moves behind to be taken up by those who are to follow. I smile at the undergraduates here. In addition to these images of how interpretation both proceeds and is curtailed, I would add the idea that knights are able, without denying their limited scope, and I think your Slovene word already captures this, to jump over things. If we understand how to distort, twist free of, and jump over certain aspects of tradition, we shall negotiate and create our way of being a part of the text of the tradition rather than simply being slaves to it. Twisting away from the tradition, distorting and reorienting ourselves to it will take a fair amount of refusal, some committed resistance, and at times jumping over moments and aspects of received interpretations. This allows the jumping over of those, in inverted commas, troubling moments in text that have no place in the progress we mean to bring about, or which has already come about through political and social struggle. This sifting and evaluating is undertaken with a view to what remains to be reclaimed, repurposed, and reintegrated from the tradition toward liberatory ends. In a real sense, the means for transformation is also there in the past. Another way to conceive what such distortions are able to achieve today by returning to the tradition, in my playful rendering now derived from Verwindung, is to understand it, as we say in English, getting the better of things. Getting the better of things means something like making a more persuasive, a more life-inducing, a more vital interpretation after a struggle with the contesting forces. A twisting interpretation moves the reading of a text so that it ends up in an unexpected place. These interpretations allow a seeing ahead from the past, from an orientation that understands we shall have to invoke the past to make a move toward the future, and that what rhetoricians call the burden of proof will most often fall to us. I do not harbor any illusions. This practice will neither be easy, nor will it be any easier in the days to come, as the weight of the world is substantial. Notwithstanding this weight, with a more liberatory and fitting prejudices guided by the four coordinates and our twisting night maneuvers with their distorting, jumping over, and getting the better of things, shall put us in a position of being able to agree with the contemporary radical romantic philosophers Louis and Sayre that going back into tradition, consequently, quote, does not mean a return to the past, but a detour via the past toward a future. A detour that allows the human spirit to become aware of all the cultural richness and all the vitality that has been sacrificed by the historical processes launched by the Industrial Revolution, so as to seek ways of bringing them back to life, end quote. Thus, part of the enduring quest of the humanities is the never-ending challenge of making something out of tradition so as to remake the world. Section 3. A poetry as a cavalry of horse moves. And the epigraph is from Sylvia Plath. I saw the goose flesh on my skin. I did not know what made it. I was cold. Had a ghost passed over? No, it was the poetry. For as easy and habitual as it is to use words, it is extremely difficult to use them well. As Walt Whitman says in his poem Vocalism, the question concerning language is to wonder if we shall be able, quote, after long practice, to come to the divine power to speak words, end quote. Words are everywhere. However, the fitting way to deploy them takes a special effort. Put another way still, words are ubiquitous, and their poor use is as much our problem as their being all around us is our hope. The vital possibilities language carries within it as language is the opportunity of struggle, because, as the situationists say in their fine essay, All the King's Men, quote, the problem of language is at the heart of all the struggles between the forces striving to abolish the present alienation and those striving to maintain it. It is inseparable from the very terrain of those struggles. We live within language as in polluted air, end quote. This pollution does its damage every day on the largest and smallest stages. The commonplace cliché and the misuse of words by mass media broadcasts that devastate language are as frequent as they are unnoticed. However, even if words and their debased use are tantamount to the prejudices we seek to overcome and make up the fouled atmosphere of our struggle, then it is still the case that words in the end are our allies. Quote, words work on behalf of the dominant organization of life. Unfortunately for the theoreticians of information, words are not themselves informationist. They contain forces that can upset the most careful calculations, end quote. We get the better of the worst use of words, then, with words employed more excellently, which is another name for poetry. I offer the following reading as one example of how the words of poetry might respond to words disastrously used, whose power might leave a lasting mark on our thinking. Forgive me a US-based example, which I am afraid has its all too global consequences. Make America great is not the worst thing a radical North American hermeneutic could say. Indeed, as I have argued elsewhere, actualizing our better potential belongs to the struggle to win over the dissatisfaction of all of us who suffer. As each of us will have noted already, this is not the exact slogan uttered today by the red cap-wearing throng. We know too well it is the addition of the tag word again in the slogan that moves things towards its disgusting nationalism. And yet, against this crass and dangerous use of language, we are able to respond with poetic eloquence, deploying these same words to put to work here in a superior way. The words to which I turn to respond to the slogan come from the now renowned Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes in his 1935 poem, Let America Be America Again. From the beginning of this roughly 90-line poem, we read in its initial stanza a place open for our contemporary conversation. Quote, "Let America be America again. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above." And then the poet opens a parenthetical and writes, "It never was America to me." Embracing the insight that the insubordination of words, their desertion or open resistance is a symptom of the general revolutionary crisis in society, we are able to reclaim the word again by reading this poem. Of course, the word again rings here in a more excellent way to mean over, as in make over, which is to say to start over again, to start anew, to try again, but better this time. From the beginning, the word again is filled here with futurity and challenges, if not cancels out, the dangerous, dishonest, and disgraceful use of the right-wing populist slogan. In addition, we note in our spirit of tradition that Hughes's again means to call us to undertake and make over with the only material left to us, the remains of what has been. The potential the past still holds as it can be fashioned anew by the quality of our imaginations for the future. The poem takes to task the avowed claims of the documents and ideals which are said to be at work for everyone by asking for whom they are not working. In the italicized lines that follow the poem's opening, a voice comes to the verse sounding as if it embodies a surprise, as if its understanding is being brought up short by the claim that, for some, America has never yet been the America of its self-proclamation. Calling these ideas the stars, certainly no innocent symbol in America who calls its flag the Stars and Stripes, the voice asks with a dash of accusation, quote, "Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws the veil across the stars?" Hughes, in Whitmanian fashion, responds by way of cataloging those whose dream for the attempt to try to make America again otherwise, who dream of a future fitting the excellence of decent people, which they have so far been denied. This roll call of those who draw the veil includes the poor white fooled and pushed apart, the Negro bearing slavery's scars. This catalog also includes the red man driven from the land and the immigrant clutching hope. Taken together, these folks and many more besides, the bondsman, the worker, the Negro servant, people humble and hungry are also there. These are the ones who find, like those today, the succor offered them by neoliberalism, as Hughes puts it so brilliantly, is, quote, "only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak," end quote. Only this, then, in exchange for their yearning. This veil, therefore, functions in the poem not to cover over and hide the faces and muffle the voices of those left out. Rather, it is a veil that acts in such a way that more is now seen and heard, like shading one's eyes from the too bright sun to see more clearly what is at hand. The veil sets into relief what must be seen and quiets for a moment the din of the oft-repeated claims of an America that will not gauge itself against the measure of its own declarations. Through the veil, the cry is raised to demand that the stars shine on everyone. It asks, we let noble words represented here by stars be allowed to say what they mean. This demand coming through the poem is called from the beginning, the dream. There is something resounding in the line, "Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed," that is future-oriented in the sense already suggested by Hughes's use of the word again. The flowing repetition of the words related to dream, using it again and again and again, brings to our vision three aspects of the dream: those who dream, the act of dreaming, and the product and the practice of dreaming. This marks the dream as something real but yet not yet fully realized, just as is the notion of America as it is considered throughout the poem, namely a promise not yet kept. Keenly articulated but nowhere fully concretized in practice, yet America and dreams both exist. Although still looking to the future, the dream's contents come in part from the having been, from what has not been yet but remains efficacious in the past. Nonetheless, these contents remain a part of our present as they voice a desire for a trajectory toward another future and are keeping with Ernst Bloch's claim that reality means, quote, reality plus the future in it, end quote. If Bloch is onto something in this definition, then the humanities, whatever many other things they might in fact be, are dedicated to being the measure and the way by which we measure the distance between the universal promise and the particular state of affairs, between the ideal and the current practice. Poetry shines a light on what is and discloses for our understanding what could and ought to be. In this sense, then, far from being an abstraction, there is nothing more real than poetry. Throughout Let America Be America Again, Hughes provides us with the insight that again and over mean that something was missed, yet vaguely cited, and that something finds itself left undone. Yet, if we understand how to read, it shows itself as being at our fingertips and near the tips of our tongues. Indeed, this poem discloses with no little clarity that some excellence that ought to have been made real has not yet been actualized. Our befriending of the tradition needs this enduring reminder. The past is also what stood as possible, but which went unactualized. There is more in the past, Ricoeur tells us, than what happened. We engage the past thus for the sake of a future, as opposed to the mean-spirited conceit that our future become an impossible reversion to a past that missed what was best about it. Let us linger just a bit longer here with the image of the dream, now linked with what has been left undone in the past, which nevertheless shows itself to our present thinking. In the middle stanza, just past the poem's halfway mark, the dream and desire for transformation that motivates all the words calls the dream at its heart almost dead. The radical space opened by the poem's use of almost is occupied by the poet himself, who goes on immediately to proclaim, quote, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be the land where every man is free," end quote. This use of yet comes again to us in various senses. In the first instance, yet means to say a still scandalous present, which includes, nonetheless, a hint of a promised and better future. The second sense of yet occurs in with the word never, meaning here something such as not yet, and the echo of a promised future within this never says simultaneously, but ought to be. Another sense of yet is at play here as well, this time saying despite. Despite all that might signal defeat, the resistance endures. One more sense awaits, as the fourth sense of yet announces what I am going to call an ethical claim. Yet here means one must, if we are to live up to what our collective selves are capable, be willing to try again and making something other than the continuation of what stands before us. Following this multivalent yet is the italicized word every, echoing something akin to a humanist and universal claim. Hughes shows this to be a cosmopolitan claim and also not simply an American one, when he links this dream with the dream that began east across the Atlantic from Harlem, New York City. Here Hughes invokes what he calls the basic dream, the dream of liberation that is the wellspring of all such dreaming. He lists it as the old world dream of overcoming. He calls it so strong, so brave, so true, that such that it animates dreams centuries hence. This is the claim that the last line of the stanza issues forth, as a cry making a demand that we, quote, must bring back our mighty dream again, end quote. Now the dream is our dream, a dream shared across time and continents. Here, two seemingly simple words, yet and again, conspire to disclose this cosmopolitan claim for a more just future. Radical work in both thinking and action shall be required on our part to make good this nuanced understanding of the basic dream and what it has inspired worldwide, intimations of which I think we find in the classic text of the Humanities. Coming back then to America and coming without a hint of sentimentality in the poem's final stanza, we are provided a more noble vision of how to proceed. It is offered by Hughes by way of a stunning alliteration and an appeal to redemption that awaits our engagement. Quote, out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem and make America again. Evaluating this poem in my reading in light of my modest theoretical contribution, we are able to say, by way of detouring words and traditional meanings, the poem performs its own twisting away from the tradition, even as now, more than 80 years later, it becomes a part of the humanistic literary tradition of which we can make use. The poem enacts as a series of beautiful horse moves to twist away from the current political slogan, as well as confounding the cruel and indecent moves of the vile sloganeers and their mendacious pawns. In keeping with the four coordinates with which I began, Hughes's poem is non-rejectionist by appealing to America's as yet unrealized potential. With its various and creative moves, the poem puts into play questions about what great should mean and asks what anyone might mean by coupling great with again in an uncritical manner. In the wake of our final stanza's list of crimes of ethical trespass, great and again are kept from coming together in any simple slogan. To the contrary, it serves rather as a battle cry for a radical transformation. Moreover, the poem is non-nostalgic because it sees the past as something to be bettered, even as the past itself provides some of the resources to make this possible. It escapes the charge of nostalgia as its use of again looks forward through what has been left undone. Rounding out the four coordinates, Let America Be America, is non-apocalyptic, calling for an ongoing creative struggle to keep the better alive, even in the face of atrocities. It's not over yet, the poem seems to say, yet only if we dream. Consequently, it declares we are not at the end. Finally, as poetry, it remains non-orthodox by caring thoughtfully for the ever-needed interpretation of words. As poems are, by their form and content, at odds with the habituated prejudices of language meant only to exchange information, they open a philosophic space for such interpretation. What is poetry if not the revolutionary moment of language, the situationist asks. In a word, the poem Hughes writes gets the better of, and not by a little bit, the stupid plan embodied in the crass political slogan. All excellent poems, and they share this with all great art, come not to decorate a world already firmly emplaced and finished. Rather, the most eminent poems come as insurrection that remind us our grounding in language, that remind us language upholds us, and that words keep us upright and joyous like percherons beneath our feet. I want to have faith that despite what every philosopher is by profession forced to acknowledge as an age-old quarrel, both philosophy and poetry are time-honored names for looking after words, which is also to say how we look after one another. A short section to close, a never-ending quest. Preparing the shape of things to come, if not winter. One last word then. If language permeates everything that gets to us by way of tradition, which is to say everything, then the humanities belong at least as much to the resistance. We must resist, it seems to me, the blessing bestowed on us by corporations. Let's not embrace their saying how well those trained in the humanities are as workers, how much money they make, and how well they are ready to learn and carry out the corporate line. Let's not encourage the study of Hamlet and As You Like It because some so-called free market-driven corporation promises to reward reading Shakespeare with a promotion and a raise. Let's not because they make this promise of wealth and advancement with this damning caveat, quote, well, I'm sure they say this, but it's not a quote. Study the classics as long as you do not learn from them what would keep you from the corporation in the first place. and imaginary quote. There is something alive and transformative in the text of the humanities if we but bring them to the fore in our interpretations. And we shall only recognize which readings are worth pursuing in the process of making them and sharing them. Who would be foolish enough to try to hide that the task is overwhelming and no small number of defeats await us? The tradition is also the record of our many failures. Nonetheless, let's take heart from Walt Whitman, who, in his poem to the foiled European revolutionaire, which bids us, quote, "Courage yet, my brother or my sister, keep on. Liberty is to be subserved whatever occurs. That is nothing that is quelled by one or two failures, or any number of failures," end quote. Possessing what I have imagined Ernst Bloch calls undischarged utopian potential, tradition calls not for its mere repetition, but for its twisting towards something else, which will mean also the bringing of the new. As Whitman also says, who knows, the best yet unexpressed and still lacking. But this expression will come from out of our careful use of words, from poetry, or at least something drawing from the poetic. Meanwhile, as philosophy and poetry teach, words wait for us to be in solidarity with them. The never-ending quest is only the promise of what might be and brings no guarantees with it that things will go well. However, it also says things will not go unless we endure by both learning how to suffer the weight of tradition and how simultaneously to twist and detour within it. The tradition is where we cannot help but begin, this hermeneutics teaches us. The humanities, understood as I do, as linked with radical hermeneutics, is the way to attempt this learning as the practice of writing, of teaching, of learning, of keeping alive institutes such as the one hosting this talk, the Forum, as sites of the invitation to question, as the sites where all of those practices make up our shared pursuit that has at its heart the desire to endure a never-ending quest again and again. Thank you.